For over the last decade that I've been involved in crypto, it's always been like crypto was slowly, piece by piece, brick by brick, component by component, trying to build this beautiful, high tech, efficient city of the future, trying to build something beautiful and futuristic and high tech. But our view of that city, our view of the city we were building has always been blurry. It's always been obscured. The lens through which we were trying to see this future city has always been sort of foggy. And it's been because of a lack of regulatory clarity. But the end of that lack of regulatory clarity, the beginning of the end, is probably starting in about 9 days. If you're already ready for clarity and an unblurry future for Cardano and all of crypto, or if you're finding value in these videos, please consider delegating to the Army of Spies DRep address and the Army of Spies stake pool, ticker AOS. All right. Thank you for joining, everyone. Thank you for joining. Let's see what we've got here. We have got Fly Over Me 2 days in a row. Let's go. Let's go. Senator Kennedy confirms Clarity Act. Markup next week. We're going to talk about it. Is it really next week though? I mean, I guess 9 days. It's 9 days, I guess. We'll talk about it. We'll look at the details. Brody's here. Let's go. Let's go, Brody. Thank you as always. Cardano's the best. Thanks for saying that. Good to see you, Brody. Good to see you. Jordan from America says, let the nocturnal emissions commence. I shall ingest them on the commute to the fiat mines. Let's go. Let's go. Nocturnal emissions. I never thought about these videos themselves as being nocturnal emissions along with the glacier drop allocations, but I guess they both are nocturnal emissions when you think about it. Eric Williams, let's go. Thanks for joining. Pucky Hawks here. Hello, says hello all. Emilio's here. Let's go. Let's go, Emilio. Sub-Zero's here. Let's go. Let's go. Okay, yeah, I thought you meant let's go. Frazek's here. Let's go. Thanks for joining. Jay Marie's here. What's up? Let's fucking go. Otis Frichov's here. Give me clarity or give me death. Let's go. I love it. That should have been the title of this video. I love it. Joe Davidson's here. Let's go. Joe Davidson says, big encoding with anti-gravity too much. I feel like AIs still have a long way to go. And despite being a really awesome tool, I don't understand people who say they one-shot an app with Opus 4.5. Yeah, I mean, I guess it depends on what you're doing. If you're doing something that the app is really familiar with, like just a really simple non-crypto, website app or, iOS app, something that it's done, something that's very, very common like that, maybe. But man, if you're doing something a little weird, like a crypto app, it seems like the thing I run into is context management. It seems like the engines they're not perfect yet at the context management thing. Blue Mammal says, Matt Damon. What's the Matt Damon reference? What's the Matt Damon reference? It's crazy to think that AI is going to be the thing that makes most fiat making things obsolete. It's crazy to think that AI is going to be the thing that makes most fiat making things obsolete. That is kind of crazy. That's a good point. That's a very good point. Are you talking about the Matt Damon movie? Are you talking about the Matt Damon movie when he goes up in the thing in space that looks kind of like this? Is that what the reference is? Raz is here. What's up, Raz? Thanks for joining. James is here. What's up? Thanks for being here. Chaos Ensued is here. Michael's here. 123 kid. Let's go. Let's go. Michael says, I've delegated. Enjoy your reviews. Thank you for the delegation. Very much appreciate it. Taz is here. Highly Unlikely is here. What's up? Let's go. Mission Zambia is here. Good morning. Good morning, Mission Zambia. Thanks for joining. Joe Davidson says, what's on the docket today? We're going to look at it right now. Troll Toll is here. Jerry Hatrick is here. Let's go. Let's go. All right, let's jump in a little bit. So I think in crypto is kind of crypto itself is kind of a utopian notion. I would call it I see. Okay, Blue Mammal said Team America World Police reference. Okay, good call. It's been a while since I've watched it. One of the funniest movies ever, but it's been a while since I've watched it for sure. But I do remember that, I think. So I think crypto has always been a little bit of a utopian notion, right? And one of the great things about it is for crypto to succeed in pushing us, some distance, whether you think it's 1% or 100%, whatever you think is the possible distance, crypto could push us toward utopia, whatever you think that distance is. The great thing about crypto is that it could do it without any craziness, right? It's not like a different economic system. Like it didn't require that you abandon capitalism. It doesn't require that you do the communist experiment thing that always leads to guns in people's faces and fat cat elites sucking up all the money and poverty and famine. Doesn't require any of those things. All crypto required for it to push us some distance toward the utopia that crypto envisioned was to exist, right? Nobody had to be forced to do anything. Crypto simply had to exist, right? Satoshi had to write the white paper. He had to launch the network. He had to mine some blocks. He had to send that first transaction to Hal Finney. Eventually, the first actual commercial transaction, the Bitcoin pizza event, would have to take place. And Laszlo, I think, if I'm remembering right, those things had to take place, and no guns had to be put in anybody's faces. No famines had to occur. Nobody had to be forced by a government to, shed the robes of capitalism. None of that. Crypto just had to exist and people would be attracted to it because it made sense that it could lead to maybe it wouldn't build a whole utopia, but it might push us some percentage closer to something that would look like a utopia. The problem has been from the early days of Cardano, I still to this day, people will debate me on this. To this day, if you ask me, why was Satoshi anonymous? Why did we not know who Satoshi was from the first day? It was such an incredible invention, right? And, of course, standing on the shoulders of others, Adam Back, all these Nick Szabo, all these people, but still an incredible invention, the launch of the Bitcoin network. Why didn't Satoshi just say, hey, I'm Hal Finney? That is the person who I think Satoshi was. Of course, Charles and many people in Cardano think it was Adam Back. But why didn't the author of the white paper just say, I'm blank, instead of using this pseudonym? So I will argue forever. The reason was they were very scared of getting thrown in prison because we'd had previous sort of digital money experiments, and the founders ended up getting into a lot of regulatory trouble. It turns out, especially in the U.S., you're not allowed to issue an alternate currency. You're not really allowed to do that. There's a long history of people going to jail for trying to issue, a cash currency that is not the U.S. dollar. The U.S. likes to maintain its monopoly on the dollar. So you've got a Satoshi who wasn't even willing to admit to being the father of Bitcoin or mother of Bitcoin. We don't really know. So we ended up with this bastard invention, fatherless invention, Bitcoin and crypto, a bastard of an invention. And because of that, from the very start, a lack of regulatory clarity. In fact, I don't even think there's a lack of regulatory clarity in Satoshi's day. It was just certain. The regulation was certain. You weren't allowed to do what he was doing. But there's certainly been, things got better. Bitcoin proliferated, got very popular. Too many people held it. It became apparent that, if Satoshi surfaced today, Satoshi would not be thrown in jail, right? My opinion is that Satoshi is dead. His name is Hal Finney. Other people can argue other things. People think it's Paul Salachi, whatever his name was. People think it's Adam Back. I think Satoshi is dead and it's Hal Finney. But from the start, there's been this lack of regulatory clarity, not just around Bitcoin, but around all of crypto. It's been uncertain. Even today in 2026, we've got to this point where TradFi has already got not just its toe in the door, but like its entire leg. TradFi is like up to its crotch through the doorway. It's ready to just pop on through. It's ready to just pop on through, right? It's like they haven't quite pushed their hips through, but right up to the crotch, all the way through the doorway. They're ready to come through. The last thing they're waiting for is the whole hog official regulatory clarity event. And that event, the best version of that we're probably going to get, the only version of that we could possibly get in the near future, is passage of the market structure bill in the Senate. It's the Senate counterpart of the Clarity Act that's already passed the House pretty easily. Now it's going to get through the Senate, and it's going to be the Senate counterpart to the Clarity Act. It's going to have to go back to the House because the Senate's going to change some things, I'm sure. Then it's going to go to Trump's desk, and the White House is going to sign that thing so fast, right? The ink on the paper will not even be dry, and Trump's signature will already be on it. This is a big deal for his campaign. He got all of our votes. He got crypto's votes for sure. And the campaign promise is that this thing's going to happen. Regulatory clarity. And this has literally been a 17-year thing. We've been trying to get this for 17 years. Now it's 9 days away. This is 9 days away. And, it's very unclear if it's really 9 days away or if it's, 9 days until the markup. And then we don't know how long after that till this thing actually happens. But regulatory clarity is almost here. We've been talking about this utopia, right? It's probably some beautiful solar punk fantasy just like this. We're walking around in this enclosed glass dome that maybe opens up on beautiful days. There's lush vegetation everywhere. The buildings are super cool and space age looking. It's like this beautiful utopian vision. And we've never really been able to, take a gander at it without that nagging feeling in the back of our head that the wrong administration was going to end up in the White House, and they were also going to have the House and the Senate and just make this whole fucking thing illegal, right? That's always been a possibility. And as much as we've been afraid of that in crypto, TradFi had to worry about that so much more. They had to worry about that so much more because while we were already in crypto, all of us, we're pretty much crypto natives. TradFi, they're going to be migrants. They want to immigrate into crypto, and they are not allowed to do it unless it's legal. So this is really what could begin in 9 days. I'm going to call that the beginning of regulatory clarity. What could be starting in 9 days is maybe the most important thing that's ever happened in crypto. It really is. You could argue maybe the advent of smart contracts with Ethereum, maybe that was the most important thing. Maybe the birth of stable coins, maybe the birth of proof of stake. If you're in Cardano, you might say EUTXO, smart contracts. You'd say all these things are pretty important, but maybe the most important thing ever in crypto, aside from the Genesis block in Bitcoin, aside from the Hal Finney transaction, aside from the Bitcoin pizza event, maybe, you could argue the Wired article was pretty important. Aside from all these things, this might be the most important thing that's ever happened in all of crypto, because all of a sudden we don't have to worry. It's official. We don't have to worry about crypto getting outlawed. We don't have to worry about being branded securities. Next time we have a Gensler type character running the SEC for a anti-crypto army type White House, all of a sudden it's legal. We're official. We're legit. We're no longer outlaws. We're no longer the bank robbers. We are now just regular citizens doing regular citizen, legit legal stuff. This is a pretty big turning point. So let's take a look. I'll hit the comments here real quick. Oh my God, I forgot to ask, did you see Charles hit commits? Do you see Charles hit commits? I saw that. I haven't included that in any videos yet, but I did see that. Get commits. You're saying get commits. Yeah, I did see that. I haven't looked closely at it. I didn't see what he actually committed, but it's good. I think it's a good sign. So what Joe is referring to is, Charles, he's kind of been the sort of the face of Cardano And so what we didn't see Charles doing, while he was being the face of Cardano, not as prominently, is we didn't see him, you know, really being involved in the technical work, and I'm not saying he wasn't, I'm sure he could cite many, many examples where he was doing exactly that, but it's not something we saw. But here we are just 6 days after he leaves X, and all of a sudden we're seeing Charles actually committing code to the GitHubs. So I think this is a pretty positive thing. Matt, good morning. Thank you for joining. Okay, let's jump in and talk about what's going on though. So we started seeing posts like this morning. Senator John Kennedy says crypto market structure legislation markup will happen next week. And we really found out about this, about a month ago. About a month ago, we started seeing, there was still some hope. Some people were still saying, maybe the Senate's going to pass it, in December, and Trump will sign it, and, it'll create some kind of a Santa rally. It'll help fuel a Santa rally. None of that happened. We all know none of that happened. What we did hear in December was that they were actually aiming for a markup on January 15th. So this January 15th deadline for a markup, it's kind of been set for over a month, right? The senators knew it was going to happen last month pretty early, and they kind of let us know what we were really looking at was January 15th. So here's what everybody's referencing. Here's the report that everybody's referencing from Punchbowl News. You can tell I'm not willing to pay my way past the paywall of Punchbowl News, because who is paying for Punchbowl News? Certainly not me. But what we can see here, Senate Banking Committee Chair Tim Scott, who is a friend of crypto and actually a friend of Cardano, told lawmakers and staff this week that his panel, and when I say, I don't want to oversell that, him and Charles have talked. There's been communication between him and Charles. We've seen pictures of him and Charles talking about how they've had deep discussions about crypto. So I don't want to oversell that and make you think he's like our dude in the Senate. But Tim Scott told lawmakers and staff this week that his panel would hold a markup of crypto market structure no later than January 15th, whether or not the bill has bipartisan support. Multiple senators said on Tuesday that Scott made clear next week's target of a markup was a firm deadline. My understanding is the chairman is going to have a vote come hell or high water on Thursday for the next week, said John Kennedy, who remains skeptical of this process, right? John Kennedy, I mean, he's not the oldest senator we've ever had, but he's also not the youngest. So I'm not surprised. He's an excellent, entertaining character in the Senate. Very entertaining. Watching him cross-examine witnesses basically in committees is hilarious, but also not the youngest man who's ever been in the Senate. So no surprise. He's a little skeptical of this whole digital money thing. But this is what we got going on. Everybody's saying it's still pegged for the 15th. So we also saw reports like this today. Crypto czar David Sachs meets with senators to help advance crypto market structure legislation. So this is great. Like, I think a lot of us were maybe a little disappointed when we found out there would be a crypto czar who would also be the AI czar. And then some of us were kind of disappointed when we found out it was David Sachs. But we can't have everything, right? You can't have absolutely everything. So it's good we have a crypto czar. It's good that there's somebody in the White House who's just assigned to crypto. Okay, that's a lie. He's assigned to AI and crypto. But it's good we have somebody who's actually over crypto. Who in the previous White House, it felt like we had people who were assigned to crush crypto. Their whole job was to suppress crypto. In this White House, we got somebody who's assigned to actually promote crypto, and he's actually doing the work, it looks like. He's actually meeting with senators and trying to make sure this thing happens. He's actually doing, it sounds like, what people like us would be doing. You or I, if we were in this position, this is probably exactly what I'd do. I'd go on down there and talk to the senators and ask them what the hell they need to get this thing through. Dr. Doak is here. Howdy. Thank you for joining. So let's drill down on that, get a little more detail here. This is a post that says David Sachs pushing market structure legislation is tied to what happens next. Senators have picked January 15th for a markup of the Clarity Act in the Senate Banking Committee. This is the formal process. It's the stage where committee members review the bill and vote on whether to advance it to a full Senate vote. If it moves forward, let's hope it's before the mid-February Senate recess, or progress will be delayed. I was kind of dreading this moment. When I read this, I was like, I've been dreading this moment. Clear back when I realized it was not going to pass in December, the first thing I thought of was, okay, can I even hope for January? Can I even hope for January? Because historically, what happens when I really want something to make its way through the US Congress, right? I get disappointed like 5 or 6 times. And then on the seventh time, when everybody's like, it's going to happen on this date, usually, usually you need to push that date back at least a month or two. So when I found out the markup was scheduled for January 15th, I was thinking, okay, this means as we creep up to January 15th, people will start talking about February. And if they're saying February, that could mean March or April. So we're going to have this markup, it sounds like, on the 15th. Now we have to confront the fact that people are discussing whether or not they can actually get this thing done before the mid-February recess, or progress will be delayed. How many times have you seen the US Senate, meet people's expectations when the B side result is things could get delayed? It's almost always delayed. Anyways, I think this poster is right. All eyes on the 15th. Clearer oversight would make it easier for institutions to operate within markets. And he's got a calendar item here, an agenda item. What does it say? House Financial Services, Agriculture, Senate Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs. Sponsor. Okay, there's the sponsors of the bill. Okay, I can't see any super valuable information there, but it looks like things are happening on the 15th. A markup at least. When we actually get this bill, I don't know. But God damn it, am I happy to see the beginning of the end of the lack of regulatory clarity? I'm so happy. Curly Knox is here. Ayo, thanks for joining. Matt says, man, they are slow. Yep, absolutely. Joe David says, apparently the U.S. wants to buy Greenland. Oh, my God. Yeah, that one. That one is, I understand the strategic military case for it, but man, if we haven't pissed off Europe enough, right? They might make the purchase in BTC. That would be epic. If we bought something the size of Greenland with BTC, that would truly be a historic event. Streetwise says banks are salivating to be the next big tech by bringing in crypto and prediction market gambling. This is okay. Yeah, so banks are definitely salivating to be involved in some cutting edge tech. That's true. Banks are not known for being involved with the most cutting edge tech. In fact, if you've been inside certain large financial institutions, it's kind of shocking how old some of their software is, because I can't give you the specific example of this I'm thinking about, but the some of the software worked, like worked a long time ago, and because it worked and it never stopped working, they never had a reason to replace it, so they never replaced it. So there's a lot of very old-fashioned stuff going on technology-wise in banks. They would probably love to be on the cutting edge for once. How they could be involved in prediction markets, that's another question. I don't know about prediction markets, but definitely they'd love the cutting edge tech. So yeah, I mean, the problem with the Greenland thing is Denmark. There's definitely a contingent that is not super stoked about this, but who knows? I mean, Trump, the dude can definitely close deals. He can definitely close deals, but and I mean, like, convincing the population is so small, convincing the Greenlanders to be in favor of it, like, that's one thing, but convincing Denmark this is a good idea, I guess we'll see. Yeah, banks have a lot of boomer DNA. I think that's very true. Very true. So we also saw this. I thought this was interesting because there might be some technical reasons why this isn't really what we think it is. But I was kind of hoping we'd seen the last of this. So this post says, it seems that the Southern District of New York Department of Justice has sold the Bitcoin that the Samurai devs paid it as part of their plea deal, even though Executive Order 14233 mandates that forfeited Bitcoin be held in the US's strategic Bitcoin reserve. And this wasn't the first time in the Samurai case. So this is pretty interesting. Then we immediately saw this post from the executive director of the President's Council of Advisors for Digital Assets, Deputy Director, Department of War, Office of Strategic Capital, Patrick Witt, and he says, we are looking into this. So if you dig into the comments behind these posts, you'll see, if you dig into the comments behind these posts, you'll see that there may be a technical argument that this didn't violate this executive order, but damn it, like we were hoping for the US government actually buying crypto and adding to a US strategic Bitcoin reserve, when we found out it was going to be more like, no, they're going to keep the stuff they've already confiscated. That was like a distant consolation prize. That wasn't what we wanted at all. But now we're seeing, oh, actually, the Southern District of New York thinks they can just sell it. So what's the point of this executive order if the DOJ, which is an executive branch, agency, if the DOJ, which is fully under the control of the executive branch, is itself selling these kinds of assets? So the U.S. wants a, no, I don't think the U.S. wants a war with I don't think the U.S. wants a war with Europe. I think Trump is just trying to, Trump's a wild boy. I keep calling this administration Washington a bunch of wild boys. They are a bunch of wild boys. They are like almost feral as far as politicians go. I think they want to make a deal, but it's kind of shocking. When he first started seriously talking about this, I was kind of shocked by it. But I get the strategic military case for it, but man, wild. This is wild boy stuff. Matt says a partnership agreement lease where something is very feasible, especially there's something in it for Denmark, like security. Maybe. Yeah. I mean, Trump's good at making deals. Government needs clarity, then they can talk about Greenland. Yeah, I agree with that. Like, let's do the Clarity Act first, and let's stop selling. If you're not going to buy any crypto, at least stop selling the crypto you've got. Especially in this case where a lot of people are talking about potential. People are talking about, maybe a potential pardon for the Samurai devs. And here you guys are selling off all of their assets. This says, and this wasn't the first time the Samurai case of the SDNY acted in defiance of federal guidance. But I mean, also, if some district in the US is going to act in defiance of executive branch guidance, that'd be one of your prime picks right there. For sure, that'd be one of your prime picks. So, okay, this was sent in by It's All a Play. This is kind of interesting. So, this is a use case. This is a use case for crypto that we've talked about for a long time, right? It's like, and this, I agree, this is like one of the most obvious use cases. If a lot of this government entitlement stuff was put on the blockchain, I think we could, I think we could, um, I think we could get rid of a lot of the fraud. So the fraud is basically the beautiful thing now is people are so online and so active and so activist that if everything was just online, there would be enough activist sort of journalism that people would be able to root out a lot of this fraud if everything was on the blockchain, right? If they could access everything, there'd be a lot of people who would be happy to get the social clout of having rooted out this fraud. I mean, even without this, even with someone having to travel to Minnesota, we saw that it was worth it for one person at least, to go there, go to Minnesota and do this. If this was all on the blockchain, there would be a million forensic blockchain guys who would be happy to pick up a little social clout to root out some fraud. And, that wouldn't even be necessary, because in that case, we could just have, regular employees of the federal government who just do that. We could just hire guys just to forensically track all of these entitlements and try to prevent this. So I think this is true. I think this is a great use case for blockchains. Actually, we've known this for a long time. The transparency of blockchains is perfect for rooting out fraud. Those who would give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety. Yeah, I agree with that. That's a very oft used quote for sure, and I think for good reason. I think it's 100% true. So Matt says, let's do everything simultaneously. I think we have to. Dolphy Wolf, good morning. Has World War III started yet? Thank God, not yet. Isn't AI perfect for chain analysis? Yeah, I would almost say it like blockchains are perfect for AI analysis, right? Blockchain data is like tailor-made for AI analysis. I haven't seen any like I'm sure it's already happened many times, but I actually personally haven't seen any cases where somebody used AI and did one of those gigantic, who is it, Zach XBT or whatever his name is, one of those gigantic investigations. Like I'm sure we're going to start seeing cases where people are doing what he does in like 1% of the time with AI, less than 1%, probably, 100th of 1% of the time he takes. But I think that's all good. If we can track down some thieves in the robbery forest using AI, that's great. The transparency of blockchains is made for AI. It's like perfectly perfect for AI. They want everything tracked except for their stuff. That's true. I mean, if the anti-crypto army had it their way, we would have CBDCs and full tracking of all of our shit and none of the government stuff for sure. Yeah, for sure. Okay. So this is kind of interesting. So a lot of people are looking forward to, I would say a lot of people are sort of anxiously looking forward to the Supreme Court's decision. Some people are predicting that Trump might have to give back some of the tariff money. I think even Polymarket, I think today we saw some Polymarket odds that Trump was going to have to give back some of the tariff money based on the Supreme Court decision. So we'll find out. I think I saw that was going down Friday. On Friday, we might hear something. I don't know if that's the right date, but that's what I saw today. So this is kind of impactful for crypto because if the US economy finds itself awash in surplus money, that kind of higher liquidity environment is certainly the kind of environment that crypto has excelled in the past. And the contracting liquidity environment we've been in for the last 4 years, that's the opposite. So, like, of course you want the law to be carried out. Whatever we decide is the law. You want the government to stick with compliance. You want them to comply with the law. But man, it'd be a lot better for the U.S. economy and hence for crypto if that money was in the economy. Maybe you could argue, maybe on a global scale, you could argue that some of these countries also have a huge impact. Some of the countries that paid the tariffs also have a huge impact on crypto. And maybe by putting the money back into those economies, maybe that would also be helpful for crypto. So it can get pretty complicated when you try to think about this on sort of like the macro and the micro scale, what's better for crypto. But it seems like whenever something good happens for US liquidity, it's also good for crypto. But in this case, it's a weird situation because it's sort of a zero-sum game in terms of who gets each dollar of these tariffs. Okay, Omar says, let's go get it done. Would you be able to give us a temperature check of the general public consensus on the ground in the States about the whole Venezuela situation? It's pretty much polarized on party grounds, right? I think if Biden had done this in the last administration, the left would have celebrated it and the right would have condemned it. Because it was done in this administration, the left is condemning it and the right is celebrating it. You've also got an issue that it's happening right after Mamdani got elected in New York. And Mamdani is a part of a socialist organization. He's a member of a socialist organization that actually sent delegates to Venezuela and lauded uh lauded Maduro just like a year or two ago. So they were celebrating the dictator we just arrested a couple of years ago. So the left, because Mamdani is kind of the darling of the left right now, there's even more reason for them to condemn this, because they're a certain wing of the left, is even more into socialism right now than normal. And this is definitely, like, the stories coming out of Venezuela from actual Venezuelans are in direct conflict with the far left narrative of this. So it's very polarized left right now. How do you think Israel plays into crypto? Mm, I think Israel is very focused on military security issues right now. I don't think the Israeli government necessarily is, I mean, who knows? The Israeli government is smart. They're very smart. So I'm sure they're thinking about crypto in all the same ways that any government would be. But I think they're pretty preoccupied with what they have going on the security front right now. So I don't think they're doing anything. I don't think they're doing anything special right now. Given the focus on security matters. Anything special they wouldn't normally be doing anyways. If Sachs has any sway over the act and Tim Scott, decentralization would mean nothing except to us. Yeah, I mean, this is why we were worried about Sachs. Sachs is not exactly he's not exactly our kind of crypto guy. In Cardano, Cardano was pretty non-VC oriented. I was going to say anti-VC, which is also true. We are really anti-VC. I was just trying to make it more palatable, but we are kind of anti-VC, and Sachs is from that whole world. So he's not our kind of crypto guy. And will he be pushing for things like, if it came down to a question where it was like, Ethereum is not going to make the cut because they don't have decentralized governance. Sachs is the kind of guy who's going to insist that Ethereum makes a cut. It's going to make the cut anyways, just because it's so big. Is Solana not going to make the cut because it's not decentralized enough? He's going to push Solana across the line. Where does how does that conversation go with a guy like Tim Scott, who spent a lot of time talking to Charles? Who the hell knows, right? I have a feeling what's going to come out of the end of that process is what you expect, right? Even if even if the standard should be that you need to have decentralized governance, that's not going to be the standard, at least when it comes to Ethereum and Solana, right? And any sense of a Nakamoto coefficient over 10 being required is not going to be the case. Any notion like that is not going to be the case, because Ethereum and Solana and Bitcoin aren't going to make that cut. So no matter what, it's sort of like, how do you describe this? It's like, if some farmer in a rural area discovers that there's a giant lithium deposit underneath his land, it's just not going to be the case that he forms a corporation to extract and refine that lithium. His land's going to get bought by somebody. And it's sort of the same, it's going to be a gigantic corporation that ends up doing that. It's not that this farmer is going to turn into, a lithium magnate. He's just going to sell his land. So I think it's kind of the same thing. It's like, no matter what, no matter how ambitious that farmer is, he's going to end up selling his land because somebody's going to offer him too much money. I think it's kind of the same with those blockchains. Those blockchains are too big. They're too big. They're going to be included no matter what. And that's really problematic, because the standards should require things like decentralized governance, but we don't have that in Ethereum. And as I've discussed recently, we also don't have that in even Bitcoin. Their only argument they have decentralized governance is, when somebody tries to fork the Bitcoin blockchain, the miners get to pick which chain they point their miners at, and they argue that's a form of governance. Ethereum doesn't even have that kind of argument. They have no governance. When was it? It was like a year ago that Vitamin Butters made the post where he pointed out that he was the one, and it was actually kind of funny because it was sort of like a rage crash out on Twitter, where he's pointing out that he was the one who appoints all the Ethereum Foundation members. And of course, the Ethereum Foundation governs the entire ecosystem. So there is no decentralized governance in Ethereum, but you can't really imagine any scenario where Ethereum doesn't make the cut as a commodity. So they either have to change the standard to something it shouldn't be, or just grandfather in a bunch of these blockchains. They could do either one. I mean, it'd be very expected if we just saw a paragraph that says, hey, Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana, and maybe a few others are in no matter what, and everybody else has to meet these standards, because they're not going to go through and list every single crypto ecosystem in the entire space. That's not going to happen. We're not going to see that. So, there's either got to be standards for everybody, or some are just going to be explicitly grandfathered in. So it'd probably be better if they just grandfathered in some of these giant blockchains that shouldn't really qualify. If they just grandfathered them in, that would be better than changing the standards. Because they're really, in order to be decentralized, you really should have to have a Nakamoto coefficient above fucking 3 or 4 or 5, right? That's not decentralized. You should have to have a Nakamoto coefficient higher than that. But if they did that, you've got a problem with some of our biggest blockchains. You should really have to have decentralized governance. But if they did that, Ethereum doesn't get in. So it's definitely going to be the job. Sachs is definitely going to be like vomiting all over any senator who tries to say anything that would preclude the biggest blockchains from being a part of the commodity group, qualifying as a commodity. Like Sachs is just going to puke all over those senators. And the White House is going to put so much pressure on them, right? It's like there's no way the bill comes out the way it should. It's either they're going to have to change the standards to something they shouldn't be, or certain blockchains just get grandfathered in. I hope they just grandfather them in, even though to me that's kind of a miscarriage of policy. That's better than having these super low standards, because if you can have a Nakamoto coefficient of fucking 3 and 0 decentralized governance and still be called decentralized, there's a lot of fucking blockchains that will be called decentralized that are very, very fucking centralized. So those are my feelings on that. U.S. just bombed Iran's nuclear facilities. You're talking about the previous bombing, right? U.S. is working with all EU countries and China. Don't let saber rattling fool you. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we work very, very closely with the EU, and we have such extensive trade relations with China. We also work very extensively with China. It's true. Do I think Israel controls America? No. I mean, I wish I could tell you guys a little bit more about my background, but it would give you too much information. But um, I've definitely been around a lot of Israelis in my life, and they do not control America. So are they very effective lobbyists? Yeah. Yeah. They're very effective diplomats and lobbyists. You know who I've actually had, again, I don't want to give you too much information about myself, but very, very high level diplomats. I've been in front of them in person when they told me they very strongly believe the most effective diplomats in dealing with the US are fucking Canada. No question. They were like very, very strong on this specific point. The most effective diplomats in dealing with US are Canada. So is Israel good? Are they effective diplomatically? Yes. Are they effective lobbying wise? Yes. You know what? So are we. So is the US. The US goes all over the world. We're very effective diplomatically. We're very effective lobbying, foreign governments for the policies we want. It's like, governments full of smart people are good at these things. These are what governments full of smart people are good at. If you have a whole government of people with high IQs, they're going to be good at these things. We're good at it. Canada's good at it. The EU's good at it. Israel's good at it. A lot of countries are very good at this stuff. So the world needs the US to survive. Yeah, I mean, so in the Cold War, this was the case, right? In the Cold War, the US, some people disagree with this approach, this recounting of Cold War history, but I believe there's a persuasive argument that the way the Cold War went down is the US made a security deal with the whole world. We will patrol the world's blue water trade routes. We'll make sure anybody can ship goods anywhere in the world, and pirates or foreign governments won't steal your shit. And in exchange, you're going to help us fight communism. That was the deal. Not even fight communism necessarily, just contain it. Just fucking contain communism. And both sides, well, not in all cases, but the US basically did that. They were the world police. They were the world naval police specifically, also the world police in a lot of other ways. But really, though, the world naval police enforcing the right to free trade globally. So we had this global free trade system, right? Then the Cold War ended. The Soviet Union dissolved. China became super capitalistic, and we didn't really need to contain communism anymore. So we no longer needed to make that deal. It's now taken several decades, but the US is really done with that deal. We're no longer going to patrol the world's oceans. We're just not going to do it. It's too expensive. It doesn't make sense for the US to do it anymore. Was the world a beautiful place when we were doing that? Yes, I think it was, when we had global trade and nobody had to worry about pirates. Are we doing that anymore? No. As people can tell by what's been going on in the Red Sea with the Houthis, the US is no longer, out there fighting pirates wherever they may appear. We're just not doing it anymore. So, there's an argument the world's going to devolve into trading blocks. And, some of those trading blocks the US might not be a part of. So, yeah, Koti Shahaf Bar-Geffen is the head of Koti, and he's an Israeli guy. Okay. Emilio says, there is a catalyst vote coming up. How would we know if something is good to vote for or against? So, catalyst is a crazy thing, right? The votes in catalyst are very different than the Voltaire. Catalyst is a part of Voltaire, but the votes that the DReps like myself engage in are very different than Catalyst. Catalyst is sort of, the DReps as a group, myself included, voted to give Catalyst money. Catalyst, there have been some miscarriages of justice in Catalyst over the years. Some things have definitely gotten funded, and after the fact, we all looked at that. All of us in the Cardano ecosystem were like, how the hell did that get funded? Do not give those fuckers money. And yet they got the money just because that's the way the vote worked out. So there have been some things that have happened in Catalyst that nobody really approved of. But Catalyst is this kind of amazing thing. When Catalyst first debuted, and it was like, hey, we've got, basically, when Catalyst first debuted, Catalyst was sort of like the world's biggest DAO, even though nobody would call it that outside of Cardano, it really was. Now, all Voltaire, counting the DRep control over the treasury, is the world's biggest DAO. But even just Catalyst alone was sort of the world's biggest DAO when it first debuted, back before we had DReps controlling the whole treasury. I think Catalyst is kind of a cool thing. The fact that we've got this decentralized, kind of funding mechanism, it's sort of like this gigantic VC type. It doesn't operate like a VC firm. Obviously, it's not really venture capital, but it kind of funds the same kinds of projects in some ways, as like, maybe like a VC firm only focused on very micro projects. So I think it's cool. We have this mechanism to fund very, very small stuff, very, very small 0 to 1 kind of stuff. I think it's cool we have that. Is it chaotic and insane? Yeah, Catalyst is a little chaotic and insane. There's so many projects asking for money. How you wade through those and figure out what's worthwhile and what's not, very subjective issue. It's sort of like, I think for a lot of people, it boils down to what categories of things do you want to fund, because it's so hard to figure out who are the right people, which projects are right. But maybe a good starting point is just sort of like, what projects of things do you think should be funded by Catalyst? Okay. People are asking a bunch of questions on Koti. I haven't paid a lot of attention to Koti in a long time, so I can't really address those. Ideally, we have to read the proposals on Catalyst. Yeah, definitely. If you're voting on if you're voting in Catalyst, you should definitely read the proposals. The problem is there's such an insane amount of proposals. It's hard to get through it. It's hard to get through it for sure. Okay. So Solana is more like the mad ant. Solana is kind of like your crazy ant, Solana is, by my definition of the term, not really decentralized. It kind of focuses on all the bullshit that I think, has kind of tainted our image, like the meme coin casino stuff. It is kind of like your crazy ant, it's kind of like kind of like a crazy young ant who's out hooking up with guys, and you got these old guys being like, "How's your aunt doing?" And you're like, "Oh God, please don't ask me about my aunt." Solon is that kind of crazy aunt, I think. I was just trying to answer. I have no opinions on Cody. Okay, so that's Cody discussion. I'm more interested in the technology, not who invented it. Yeah, I'm with you on that. I think the important part is definitely the technology and not the personalities behind it. If you're talking about Catalyst, I think you're probably talking about Coty, and I'm with you. I'm with you on your perspective on that. In Catalyst, it's I wish there was more technology being invented in Catalyst. I wish there was more. I wish every project had novel technology. That'd be cool. Okay, you guys are talking about Israel. A vote or a mock-up or the real vote could happen. A vote of a mock-up or the real vote could happen. Which vote are you talking about, Easweez? So he doesn't really though. So we have a close relationship, right, with the Israeli government. But if you went back and followed, like I followed all of the news after Al-Aqsa flood. I followed all the news super closely. There Trump really did not do everything that Netanyahu asked of him. He really did not. There were a lot of things that Israel would have loved for Trump to do that Trump definitely didn't do. Like a lot of people, even right after Al-Aqsa flood, a lot of people were like, hey, the position of the US government has always been, if Americans are taken hostage somewhere, we send fucking Delta Force to terminate the kidnappers and rescue those people. We do not fuck around on this. That was one of the first times when the American government was just like, we're not going to do anything. Somebody else is going to handle that. Right. And right from the start, that was kind of the attitude from the administration. And that's pretty much what fucking happened. It was like shocking to a lot of international relations and military, sort of international military analysts, that the US was going to let so many fucking Americans get kidnapped by terrorists, held hostage for so long, and the US was not going to send a bunch of tier 1 guys to kill every single one of those motherfuckers. That was like very shocking given the history of the US. Part of the deal in the US has always been, if Americans get taken hostage somewhere, I mean there are examples where this also didn't happen, but it's sort of an American thing. If Americans get taken hostage somewhere, the US government is going to be first in line to send some dudes who are very good, very good at their jobs to kill those guys. And that did not happen here. It did not happen here at all, for good reason. The Israelis are definitely the Israeli military is definitely the best in the world at dealing with Hamas, no question. So there was good reason for it, but Trump definitely didn't do everything Netanyahu wanted him to, for sure. I hope there's something in the bill about decentralization. I feel like they will sneak some CBDC language in. That would be so disappointing if so. Because the right controls the Senate right now, I think it would be really hard. I'm sure there's people on the left. I'm sure there's people on the left who are. I'm sure there's people on the left who would love to try to make some kind of compromise to get something about CBDCs into that language. But I think we're far more likely to see language that forbids CBDCs. A lot of people on the right in Congress have basically lobbied their colleagues for some declarations that the US can like never have a CBDC. So there's a really strong strain of thought that we just need to not only not pass language allowing for CBDCs, but to outright ban CBDCs in the US. So that seems to be pretty strong. If you're talking to me, Izweez, I hate to narrow down where I'm from because I don't know if you're talking to me, but if you are, I try not to narrow down. A lot of times I wanna tell people no whenever they ask questions like that. But I hate to do that because eventually over the course of 700 videos, it kind of narrows down, where I am and that kind of stuff. And I try to keep it pretty anonymous. So I try not to answer those. I think we all need to live with each other in a peaceful manner. I'm with you, Matt. I'm so with you. CSAN says I voted for Trump, but Trump is it's obvious now. Israel exposed Somalian fraud in Minnesota to steer. I mean that's there's a lot of conspiracy theory. There's a lot of conspiracy theory around Israel these days. Um, you know, um, it's sort of like it's sort of I think here's the deal. I think the reason why there's so much conspiracy theory around Israel is that whenever you have a nation that's doing that outperforms so many other nations, and Israel definitely outperforms in a lot of ways. Like they have this like amazing tech sector, no natural resources whatsoever. They do fantastic economically. Like Israel outperforms a huge number of other countries, and they don't do it with natural resources or anything like that. They just outperform. Whenever you outperform others, people are going to have a lot of conspiracy theories about you. I think that's been the case for Israel forever. It comes in waves right now. That strain of thought is very strong, but I think that's the case. I think there will always be conspiracies about why someone is outperforming everyone else. And a lot of times, I mean, the nature of the beast is that somebody's going to be on top. Somebody's going to be outperforming everybody else, and the people who aren't a part of that group are always going to have conspiracy theories about whoever is the outperformer, right? It's not just they're just out competing everybody. It's this other thing. It's this thing. It's that thing. But at the end of the day, somebody's going to be on top, outperforming everybody else, and everybody else is going to have theories about why it's not just them, outperforming everybody. So, U.S. is the world treasury. Yeah, I mean the petrodollar has been the basis for the system for a long, long time. I mean, this is just the way it is, which is why people get so worked up about BRICS, and some of these ideas. BRICS is like the funniest one to me because BRICS was literally invented. That fucking acronym, first it was BRIC. That fucking acronym was invented by a Goldman Sachs analyst. A Goldman Sachs analyst in the US. It wasn't invented by China, not by Russia, not by Brazil, not by India, not China, not Iran. None of the BRICS countries originated this idea. It was just an acronym that some Goldman Sachs analysts came up with, and then they added an S to it for South Africa. So they played up. But ask yourself how well some of the members of BRICS get along with each other. Like India and China. You, you see them as like super strong allies. Let's see. Okay. Turbo Daedalus. Yeah, this is a great example. So this is a great example of one of the projects that got the money and people were super shocked, right? And there were even some defenders. There were very few, but there were some people defending Turbo Daedalus. Actually, it was kind of I actually thought it was a really good move by Charles. Turbo Daedalus got the money. Everybody knew it was ridiculous, or everybody thought it was ridiculous at least. And Charles came out and he said, "Hey, if they can make Daedalus faster, I want to talk to them. We'll talk to them. I will make my engineers available if they've got an idea to make Daedalus faster, because of course we want that." And here we are, sometime later. Did anyone ever see the fruits of the Turbo Daedalus funding? I'm not so sure. I sure haven't. I haven't seen that Turbo Daedalus delivered a Turbo Daedalus. So, okay. US is like the World Bank. Yeah. If you out yourself, I'd stop listening. Yeah, no, I'll never reveal my identity. That's not in the cards for sure. Crypto RWA could change the way we do business globally, which requires Cardano. Yeah, real world assets. Real world assets are something that real world assets are something that have always been exciting in Cardano. I think I've mentioned this before, but back in the day, before this channel even existed, I used to do just like little videos that probably only my friends would watch. And real world assets was one of the things that I would talk about the most. Real world assets was one of the things that I found it was easiest for my friends who are not crypto people. They would hear me talk about real world assets and what was possible. And that was the thing they could connect with most. Like the example I would give is if you are a server, a waitress in, let's say Mississippi or wherever, pick your location, and you want to invest in a skyscraper in Manhattan, that is not something that's likely to happen, right? And this isn't even the kind of, commodity type real world assets that most people go to, but this is the example I gave. It's not likely to happen. It's not likely that waitress in a diner in Mississippi can, take a buck out of her earnings every day. It's not likely that she's going to end up finding a practical way to take a buck out of her earnings every day and invest that in a skyscraper in Manhattan. But if the asset, that skyscraper, was on the blockchain and it was divided up, it was tokenized into, whatever, 100 billion tokens, she could easily do that, right? If they were tradable tokens, she could easily take a buck out of her wages. Maybe that's an exaggeration. Maybe that's too low, but she could easily take, 50 bucks. Let's say 50 bucks a week. She could take 50 bucks a week and invest it in that skyscraper in Manhattan. I'm not saying that would be a good idea. I'm just saying it's something that would be very impractical for her to do today. You could argue she could find some, whatever publicly traded REIT, and she could somehow open a brokerage account and, buy shares of that REIT somehow. Sure, that's all possible, but is it likely? Is it practical? No. The waitress in the diner in Mississippi never does that. But with tokenization of real world assets, that could be something practical to do, right? It's pretty easy for all of us to take $100 or $50, buy our way into crypto through some fiat on ramp, Coinbase, Kraken, whatever. Get into crypto, and from there, if you're smart enough, and you don't have to be real smart, but if you're resourceful enough, you can figure out how to buy almost any crypto asset, right? You can, wind your way through the maze of crypto and figure out how to buy almost any crypto asset once you're in crypto. So I think the tokenization of all those kind of assets, it's just like, I mean, you can come up with theoretical downsides, but the the upsides are so extreme. Like just making all those assets available to everyone when anyone can invest in those assets, it's such a different world because we have this huge mass of people who will never own any real assets. In the US, the way it works, they'll, own a car, sort of. They'll make payments on a car. Theoretically, if they're not leasing it, they're, buying their way into the car. The car is like basically devalued by the time they pay off the car. But same thing with their house. They might own a house if they're lucky. These days, you have to be real lucky to own a house in a lot of places in the US. But if they're real lucky, they might own a house. As they pay off their mortgage, they start kind of owning the house. But besides that, the mass of people, they don't really own anything. They don't own any assets. They they own the cheeseburgers for 60 seconds before they eat them. And that's the extent of their ownership. And changing that would be a pretty big change for society in general. I think it'd be a pretty positive change. So Frazik says, I tried to vote in Catalyst once. I gave up halfway through. Yeah, it's pretty tough experience. I don't know the answer to that one. I don't talk about Catalyst very often because I don't like to you know, I don't like to point out the problems with something without offering a solution. And I don't know what the solution is. I know the people in Catalyst, the people in charge of Catalyst work hard. They work hard at it. I think they work very hard at it. I just don't know. I just don't know. I just don't know why. I just don't know how. I just don't know how if it's solvable. I don't know if there's a good way to make it solvable. Why do we have a close relationship with Israel? Because it's the only democracy in the entire region. I mean, that's pretty simple, right? BindoCam, thanks for joining. Got busy prepping up a chunk of chuck for the slow cooker. Oh yeah, chuck roast. Now you're talking my language. This is carnivore month. I'll talk about this. The thing I've done a lot of over the last 6 years of being a carnivore is buy a chuck roast and cut it into chuck steaks, because when you're a carnivore, you feel like you're faced with a couple options. The options are sort of like, buy these expensive, fattier cuts of steak, like some of the fattier cuts are a little bit expensive, or you eat these leaner cuts that are less expensive, and the leaner cuts don't provide you with enough fat, so you have to supplement that fat somewhere else in order to fill the satiation that's required. But cutting up the chuck roast, which is comparatively cheaper, fatty cut of steak, cutting that up into chuck steaks is a pretty good way to get enough fat. So I'm with you on the chuck roast. Their women are crazy hot. True. Some are. True. Yep, very true. It's because they're smart, dude. It's because they're smart. I hate to say it, they're smart. That's why. That's the real reason why. It's because they're smart. They're smarter. It has nothing to do with his real performance and everything to do with what they do. Yeah, they're just smart. They're smart. I'm sorry, guys. I'm not combative in nature, so I lean peaceful resolution over war. That's cool. Okay. Don't out yourself, but I hope to meet you at an event someday. I will definitely not ever introduce myself at an event to anybody, because that would the reason why I haven't been like sort of unmasked all these years is because I don't do that. I think most people who they sort of like set out to be, they're like, I'm anonymous. And then they go to meetups and they're like, don't tell anybody, but I'm so and so. It's like irresistible to them. I've never done that. I've told the story many times on this channel, but I've gone to Cardano events and stood next to people who were talking about this channel, which is hilarious. I've had people tell me about this channel in person and not realize they were talking to me. That's the extent to which I will not do this, because if you do that, what happens is immediately word spreads who you are, enough clues spread, and then the anonymity thing goes away. And I think most of the people who start out anonymous, they want the credit. They want the weird, small amount of credit they would get for doing that. So eventually they just kind of like out themselves. But that's not my strategy here. My strategy is actually to stay anonymous. Like, that's the valuable thing to me. The most valuable thing is maintaining my anonymity, because it's literally like the most valuable thing you can have in society is anonymity. Somebody is selling real estate and accepting crypto payments for that asset right now. Okay. Are you talking about a specific case or of that, or are you saying that someone is doing it right now? Because for sure someone's doing it. Yes, made it. J Coco, thanks for making it. I appreciate it. Frazik says it's pretty sad that a waitress has to think about investing in real estate. I mean, choose your asset. I'm just saying, like, right now, it would be very difficult for that waitress to and some people get mad at me because I'm saying waitress as opposed to server, but I have many friends who are going to benefit from the no tax on tips thing. So I'm not speaking about a group of whom many of its members I know very closely. But I mean, the thing is, pick your asset, but the fact is it's very difficult for a lot of people under a certain income level to invest. It's very impractical for them to even think about how they would invest in those kind of assets. And what this use case highlights is how much easier it is to do it if it were tokenized in crypto, right? It's like, go, if you're, if somebody's in, if somebody's in a very rural area, go to a waitress in the diner and ask her or him, if he's a waiter, ask them how they would invest in a skyscraper in Manhattan, right? Not too many of them are going to tell you how they would do it because it's very impractical for them to try to do it. But if the answer was it's tokenized on Cardano, you just have to go on Coinbase, open an account, buy a little Cardano, and then cruise on over to Cardano and buy it. That's pretty understandable. It's pretty like palatable. Okay. Yeah, of course. That's true, Frazak, of course. Yeah, I mean, this is how, like, this is an issue that I've like, I don't want to tell you guys too much about my background, but this is an issue. This is and the politics of that region are something that I've spent some time focused on, and this is a big deal. The fact that it's the only country in the entire region that is a democracy that has the same, even anywhere near the same conception of how a government should operate as ours. There's other places where the people of the country, the people in that country, there's a lot of like Westerners living in certain countries in the region. They're very happy, but it's the only democracy. It's the only real democracy that operates in the same way as ours. Our system has a lot more in common with the way that system operates than any other nation state in the entire region. How do I stay on carnivore and not lose weight? So, okay, so you probably have to up your fat intake, and so no medical advice. Consult your doctor. I'm not a medical profession. I'm not your physician, not a medical professional. But for me, the way I do this is I up the fat intake. Like, you're gonna, so you can't just increase the protein because the protein through gluconeogenesis is going to get turned into glucose in your bloodstream. You know, people who study this process are going to quibble with, my oversimplification, whatever. But through gluconeogenesis, that protein is going to get turned into glucose in your bloodstream. So you're probably already getting a lot of protein on carnivore. What I find, especially with new carnivores, is that they're not really getting enough fat. They try to do it just with the protein and not with the fat. And usually the problem is they're not getting enough fat. The thing that's going to modulate, the thing that's going to control how much fat you can intake is just your stomach's ability to digest the fat without causing problems. That's really the trick there. Okay, Brown Beardo says, I'm still holding out for meeting AOS at an event someday wearing a Daft Punk style chrome helmet and a voice changer. The problem was, so people have asked about this before, if I would do one in disguise. The problem is people are too curious and you can't trust them. People are too curious and you can't trust them. So people would try to peek under or pull the disguise off, all that kind of stuff. And if they pull the disguise off and take a photo, the jig is up, right? So, okay, so just because Israel has a proper democracy, you think we should be best allies with them, even though they are bombing? So, no, I mean, the like the wars in the Middle East are brutal. The wars in the Middle East have always been brutal. They've always been terribly brutal. And I don't, I'm not the guy who's going to defend the way wars are prosecuted in the Middle East. Even the U.S. is worse. Even the U.S. war in Iraq, I've said many times, I'm not the guy who's going to defend the U.S. involvement in Iraq, let alone anything Israel does. But you kind of get your choice. You can be allied with non-democracies or democracies. And in that region, you've got one choice if you want to be allied with democracies. So that's pretty much it. You can be a known spy. That kind of blows your cover. Yeah, I think if you're a known spy, you've already blown your cover, right? Art is a good investment for people with limited funds if they can figure out what are good artworks. So, okay, so this is kind of an interesting topic. We should, before, let me just cover this last, this is a really interesting topic. So before we hit it, let me just cover this last tab. So I don't think this is the most important thing that's going to go on this year, what the interest rate does. A lot of people will be focused on it. So just be aware. US Fed Governor Miron says we should have a 100 basis point reduction in the federal funds rate in 2026. He says the unemployment rate has been very gradually and slowly creeping up. I think we've got to cut more than 100 basis points this year. Miron, of course, was appointed by President Donald Trump last year for a term lasting until January as the US leader publicly excoriated the Fed for not cutting rates more quickly. So obviously, Miron is Trump's guy. He's dissented in all three of the Fed's policy meetings to push for larger reductions. So they were cutting, and he was the guy that was always pushing for even bigger reductions in the rate. But we'll see more of this. We'll see more of the people sort of aligned with Trump's position on the rate throughout 2026, kind of trying to cut rates. And Miron is kind of like the most famous of them because he's the guy that was dissenting from all of the cuts, wanting even deeper cuts, no matter how deeply the Fed cut. He's Trump's guy. He's just doing his job. But getting back to this. So let's get back to this. Is kind of an interesting topic. So this is kind of interesting. So the art as an investment thing is so much about the art appraisals not being something that's really regulated, right? So I think you said it right, Omar. Art is a good investment for people with limited funds if they can figure out what are good artworks. So this is the beauty of the art thing. There's no galactic college of aliens who can come down and tell us like this art is shit, this art is awesome, this one should be worth 10 million, this one should be worth $49, this one's ridiculous, why are you guys valuing this? So what happens is very rich people can buy art. I know you're talking about people with limited funds here, but very rich people can buy art, right? They can hang it in their living room or wherever, put it in one of those special storage locations in near various airports in the world where they don't really have to bring it into the country. You put in one of those, just keep it wherever for like 5 years, right? And then they can get the art reappraised. So they buy the art for whatever, they buy the piece for $1 million. 5-10 years later, they get it appraised for 10 million, right? And who's to say that appraiser is correct, right? Who's to say that appraiser is correct? Now they've got this piece, this asset that's gone from 1 million to 10 million, right? And depending on how the tax code works in their country of residence, they can do things like donate that piece of art. And now they've donated a piece of art worth 10 million. And in some cases, they can write that off. So the art thing is crazy. It's a lot like a lot of other things like it in that there's no international council that is going to come in and say the appraisal from 1 million to 10 million is complete bullshit. You've just got the appraiser and his word. You know what I mean? And there's ways I'm sure there's ways that in the case I just described where they donate the art and try to write it off as a $10 million donation. I'm sure there's cases where say like the IRS has come back and said, this is all bullshit and they proved it's bullshit. But in a lot of cases, if it's like a semi-notable artist, some appraiser comes along and he says, oh, it went from 1 million to 10 million. Guess what? Those appraisers are being paid by the people who benefit from the valuation being higher. And, there may or may not be other appraisers who are going to come in and say that's bullshit because they're also being paid by people who want their art to be worth more. So the whole industry of art appraisal, you've got all these appraisers and none of them really have an incentive to say that the other appraisers are full of shit because they're all getting paid by people who want the price to go up. And as a group, they don't really have an incentive to, cut against each other's appraisals like that. It happens, I'm sure, but they don't really have, as a group, there's not this huge incentive to prevent the inflation in the prices. So it's a good source of fuckery for people with a lot of funds. They can accomplish some very interesting some very interesting financial things with those pieces of art. But it's not entirely just that. It's not entirely just that, you know, people appreciate the art so much. It's actually like this financial instrument to accomplish things. Coconut butter in your coffee. So a lot of people do this. I just use butter in my coffee. I use Kerrygold in my coffee. Pretty much almost exclusively Kerrygold. Coconut butter tastes great, but that is a plant, my friend. That is a plant. It's more about the higher uric acid levels. You can start to get gout and stuff. I've been on carnivore for 6 years and have not had any problem whatsoever with that. People talk to me about that from the very moment I went on carnivore. I have not had any problem whatsoever in 6 years, not even a hint of it. And I don't know any carnivore who has. I know people who've had gout, but they're all omnivores. So I have not, I don't know, I don't of the carnivores I know, I don't personally know a single carnivore who's ever had even scintilla of a problem with gout. Why do we have to pay for their wars? Why am I paying for their food? What do you mean? That's why you have a second mask underneath the helmet. Good call. Good call. Mask under helmet. Okay. Inflation. Matt says inflation will go down to 2%. Yeah, I mean, we've talked about that on the channel before. I don't know. It seems like the Fed is always, I mean, they have this mandate to get to 2%. They have a mandate to maximize employment and get to 2%, the dual mandate, the famous dual mandate of the Fed. Do they ever quite get there? I mean, we get pretty low. We get pretty low in the twos, you know, based on their kind of bullshit, you know, their bullshit readings of inflation. They always figure out how to kind of cook the metric so that it looks like we eventually get down to the low twos. But it's hilarious to me how they never quite hit 2. They never quite seem to hit 2. You know, every time I'm paying attention and they say inflation is really low, I'm like, how come you guys never actually hit 2? But yeah, that's definitely part of their mandate. Vincent too says, "Hey AOS, I wish I could stay all the way, but I need to catch my sleep. I'll catch it on the recording in the morning. Happy New Year. Happy New Year, Vincent too. Thanks for joining." What is good art? Whose favor are you trying to buy? Yep. Just still a wall Banksy did graffiti on. I used to know of a good one. There was a pretty good one that would have been very easy to steal. Of course, I was not targeting a theft of that kind, but I used to know of one. The second I saw it, I was like, man, if somebody wanted to steal a Banksy, that is the one to steal. And it was very unguarded. Sub-Zero says, find yourself an Ongo Gablogian, famous art dealer. There you go. Heavy cream. Yeah, heavy cream is also good. So heavy cream is really good in coffee for sure. So no, coffee is one of a lot of carnivores actually do not drink coffee because it's plant-based. I cheat with a few things. Coffee basically because it's non-caloric. And I will also use hot sauce from time to time because it's also the hot sauce I use is like the hot sauces I like to use are non-caloric. So those are the two plant exceptions I make. But a lot of carnivore proponents will tell you not to drink coffee, but I think coffee's awesome. So that's one of the big exceptions I make. Heavy cream is really good basically in everything, including coffee, except for it usually has a couple of grams of carbs. Most of the heavy cream I see has a couple of grams of carbs. So I tend to like stay away from the heavy cream. Plus, it's so good. It's so good. If I were to put a spoonful of heavy cream in my first coffee, I'm going to put it in every coffee I have all day. And I drink a lot of coffee. And so I'm probably going to exceed my caloric target for the day if I put the heavy cream. But if we're talking about what's the most delicious and carnivore, heavy cream, very high on the list. Yeah, the one that shredded itself, if I remember right. But no doubt the art critics went insane over it anyways. So if you're just listening, there was a Banksy that if I remember right, it shredded itself as soon as it was bought at auction. And of course, it still went for a crazy price. Michael says Kerrygold is the best butter in the world. Agreed. Very strongly agree, my friend. Kerrygold is awesome. You eat enough fat, you're fine. Just the people that go low fat are at higher risk, eating nothing but protein. Okay, that makes sense to me. That's why none of the carnivores I know have had any problem with gout. That makes sense. Matt says I miss the mask. It'll come back someday. We'll do another one with the mask. It's just that it messes up the audio. It makes the audio pretty bad. Kerrygold is the best butter. The first time I tried it was so good. Been chasing the dragon ever since. Agreed. Like everybody knows that I love Kerrygold, including my significant other. So they'll try to talk me into eating some like non-Irish competitor of Kerrygold. And I want to believe there's something else out there as good, but and some of them are very, very good. They're extremely good. And if Kerrygold didn't exist, I would love them. They would be the pinnacle for me. But I have not run into that yet. I've not run into something that tops Kerrygold. Inflation going down just doesn't jibe with the Fed printing. That's true. Gingrich or SEC Treasury. Yeah, the Fed's mandate is definitely a 2% target. They just never hit it. Yeah, Powell has to say at every news conference, every FOMC meeting, news conference, he has to mention the 2% mandate. I mean, it's literally, he only has two jobs: hit the 2% target and maximize employment. Those are the only mandates. Those are the only two jobs of the Fed. So he has to talk about it every time. It is their mandate, but they never quite hit it. Yeah, Kerrygold is so good. Yeah. The only way we get to 2 is with BS numbers from Trump admin. I agree with that. I agree. I love it. I love it when they come out and say, like in the last one, when they came out and said we were at, whatever they thought they were at, 2.7 or whatever. Like, I knew the numbers were cooked. I mean, we actually definitively knew the numbers were cooked because they didn't have the data. They didn't actually have the data for some categories of things, and they just counted it as 0. I think that was definitively established, which was hilarious. So I love the sounds of it, but yeah, I agree. The numbers are always going to be cooked. Blue Mammal says I've had 2 paintings stolen at different events. That's wild. That's wild. God, I know people who've had paintings stolen, and God, I was at a party one time. I can't tell you guys what this guy stole, because you might be able to narrow down where this party was, because I don't know how much this guy I don't know if this guy lives where I went to the party with him, but I went to a party at someone's house, a guy who has a lot of art, coincidentally, and there was somebody there who had stolen something really famous and gone to jail for it. So I'm not like concealing the identity of an outlaw thief that wasn't caught. This guy got caught for stealing something very, very, very fucking famous, and it was kind of wild. God, God, there's a really funny detail about that that I want to tell you guys, but it'll give away who the person is. It might narrow down who the person is, and I don't know how much of that is public. So, mushrooms. I do not eat mushrooms. I love them. But I don't eat them. That's a little too planty for me. That's if I was going to make an exception for something. I would maybe consider that. That's something that I would think about if I was going to make a plant exception. I would think about mushrooms for sure. But I actually do not. I actually do not mess around with the mushrooms, just because that is very much not in the not a mammal or a bird. So it's not the kind of animal that I think is involved in carnivore. Matt says holidays are not good for me. They're so good. Mushrooms are such a good ingredient in so many dishes, but yeah, I don't eat them. If the Fed actually hits 2%, they'll ricochet off it so hard we'll go into hyperinflation 1000%. That's how I feel. Alcohol is not carnivore, not daily, but can't live without it. Yeah, so here's my attitude on alcohol. I've actually gone long periods of time without drinking any alcohol at all. But my feelings on alcohol are this. So when I first started sort of limiting my diet, I actually went off everything. I went off all alcohol, and there've been times recently, I think even just like a year ago, probably no, maybe even less than that. Maybe it was like 4 months ago. I had not really drank any alcohol at all for like 2 years. I drank very, very little. But the depending on what you're drinking, the fermentation and then distillation process denatures the substance so much. You know, if we're talking about like whiskey, the thing we call whiskey is so distillation changes it so dramatically. It's like not, it's so far removed from the plants that it originated with. The same thing with all distilled spirits. They're like so far from chemically, they're so different from that. I kind of put alcohol in a totally different category. And there are very legit reasons why you shouldn't drink alcohol at all. But at the same time, like if if like somebody really close to me is getting married and they demand, I drink some champagne at their wedding, like I'm not the asshole who's gonna be like, sorry, carnivore, I refuse to drink champagne at your wedding. You know what I mean? So there's legit reasons not to drink alcohol. I think there are certain occasions where it's worth deviating from carnivore for that reason. And also, um, there's plenty of reasons not to drink alcohol, but distilled alcohol is maybe champagne's a bad example because it's not distilled, but um, distilled alcohol is very, very far removed from the plants that it originated with. Send a decoy in the helmet. Yeah, I did that once. I actually did that once. There was somebody who had one of the Army of Spies shirts. I shouldn't even mention that because then people ask me when we're going to do them again. But I've mentioned this on the channel before. Somebody had an Army of Spies shirt, and they were like, "Hey, I'm going to go to a Cardano meetup. Is it okay if I just tell people that I'm you?" And I was like, "Absolutely. I encourage this strongly. Please do that." To this day, if you have a Cardano shirt, feel free wherever you go. If anybody asks you, or if you have an Army of Spies shirt, sorry, if you have an Army of Spies shirt, if anybody asks you if you are me, please feel free to say yes. I very strongly encourage that. Very strongly. Okay. Carry Gold and Lurpak, my faves. What is Lurpak? Also, we'll try some Greek ones from specific regions just because they know how to make great quality products farm wise. I would be very down to try some Greek butter, especially if it's stuff you can't get outside of Greece. I'd be very down to try that. I'm sure there are some cheeses or some butters that could rival Kerry Gold. Probably it seems unlikely at this point that there may not be some that are like widely available in the Western Hemisphere. But I'm sure somewhere there's probably some part of Greece that produces some absolutely fantastic butters. I believe that. They fired the statisticians for telling them things they don't want to hear. Sounds about right. Rulo, hola, thank you for joining. Thank you for joining. They're the third kingdom, fungus. That's a good point. Not a plant. Yeah, legit. Legit. That's why I was trying not to say the animal kingdom, because when you say the animal kingdom, people start taking in all kinds of things. But you're right, fungus is differentiated. Just don't piss off 4chan. No matter how little information you expose on video, they'll still find you eventually. I agree. No, I agree. There's people who could do it. I'm trying not to piss off any of those people. Trust me. I do not want to piss you guys off. You autists, try not to piss you off. You just wait for the great fungi revolution. I know. If what's his name? Stamets is right. Every time Stamets goes on, is that his name? Have I got the guy's right name? If every time Stamets goes on Rogan, I get afraid about that fungal mat in the Pacific Northwest. That thing starts moving around a little bit more quickly than it does now. It's kind of concerning. Hyperinflation is really good for crypto and stock. Yep, true. It is chemistry, the alembic. Ooh, man, back before when I did eat carbs. Ooh, you say the word alembic, and I think of some very delicious L's. Sorry, do you have any blood? Who who are you talking about? Do you have any blood? Is this just like a reference to carnivorism or tea? Yeah, actually, I'll sometimes late at night. So my significant other definitely drinks a lot of tea, and late at night, I will sometimes drink. This is sort of similar to the coffee exception, but sometimes late at night, if my throat needs to be warmed up. I shouldn't even say this, but tea can be good for your voice. If you have to do a lot of talking, like on the microphone, the tea can be good for your voice. Forget I said it. Forget I said that other part. But if you're if it can be good for your voice. So sometimes I'll drink a warm tea. Like I actually have a little bit of non-caffeinated tea on this desk right now. Sometimes I'll drink that before I go on the mic if I think it'll help with the voice thing. So it's not totally necessary. It's not like something I feel like I have to do, but I'll drink tea, and because it's non-caloric, I don't put anything in it. It's just tea. That's kind of another one of my exceptions, along with the coffee and the hot sauce. Those are probably the three things. But I really don't drink much tea at all compared to the coffee. If you saw what happened just before 2008 crash, all investors and banks put all their money into stocks and other things. Yeah, I was around during those days, and in fact, I was the thing I did then and do now for as a profession was very much affected by that. So I definitely saw that. I definitely lived through that. I thought you drink mushroom coffee. No, I do. I do not. I do not drink mushroom coffee. Lion's mane. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, mushrooms are very interesting. Very interesting, very psychoactive, very, very, very interesting. But I do not drink the mushroom coffee. I drink the caffeinated coffee. I know some mushroom coffees have coffee in them. But I just go for the normal coffee. I usually drink lately I drink Colombian. I used to drink a lot of Central American, like Costa Rican coffee, but lately I drink a lot of Colombian. The price of stock, gold, oil, coal spiked into infinity, and a lot of those who held assets became millionaires quick. Yeah, I was around. I was around. Um, no way, carry gold is top. I agree. If I go anywhere, I would print IMAOS on the back of the shirt. Please do. Please do. Strongly encourage it. Ever had fresh cream from cow's milk? Ooh, let me think. I've definitely lived in places where this is pretty easy to get and pretty common. I don't think I've had it though. That's kind of amazing because this is something if I could go back, this is something I could have had very easily. Back in the day. But now if I ever had the opportunity, that's something I would definitely eat. Directly from the cow, even without pasteurization or anything. I would definitely go for that. But I don't think I've ever actually had it. I don't think I've ever actually had it truly fresh. I'll believe that the market crashed again, crypto and Bitcoin assets would benefit. Ooh, yeah, I don't know. It's so hard to predict. I don't want to give any indication either way. I don't want people to say that I gave them some prediction that if we have a giant crash in 2026, that crypto and Bitcoin will be fine, because it's very unpredictable. Toast. Are you talking about a toast with alcohol or toast bread? I definitely do not eat bread. Definitely do not eat any bread whatsoever, no grains whatsoever. Yes, he definitely has the mushroom hat. The first discussion with Rogan was so funny because he got to a point where he very cryptically mentioned he doesn't like to talk about a particular mushroom. Um, and it's not everybody. There's two different possible reasons why he wouldn't talk about that particular mushroom, and everybody thought it was just the psychoactive qualities of the mushroom, and it was actually something else. Don't say it on this channel though, because I'm still freaked out by the fact. I can't tell if he was just playing it up, how much he didn't want to talk about it or refused to talk about it. So don't. Yeah, there's two other reasons besides everybody thought he wouldn't talk about it because it was psychoactive or something. But there's actually two other conspiracy theories. Neither one's really a conspiracy theory, but there's two theories about why he wouldn't talk about it. That was one of the most interesting parts of that first podcast. And if you just Google it, you'll see the two different explanations. Black pudding, blood sausage, Irish sausage. I've never actually had it. I'm very aware of it existing, but I've never had it. Um, David London, thank you for joining. Thank you for watching for years, and I'm glad you managed to catch it. Thanks for being here. No problem with the mic tonight. Yeah, it was exactly, Omar, it was actually exactly what I thought it was by the end last night. I couldn't figure out the previous two videos. We had the mic losing all power, and I thought maybe the cord was giving out, but actually I just didn't have enough slack. I've got one of those arms, one of those little arms that holds the mic, and I didn't have enough slack in the cord. And when I moved the arm, it was actually slightly unplugging the cord. So I hope we've got that solved now. Joe Davidson says, keep learning, Cardano fam. Never let the curiosity bug die. Good call. The perpetual learner perspective on life is definitely a good approach to have so far, in my opinion. Maybe when I'm 90, if I make it that far, I'll think differently. But so far, I've definitely very strongly embraced kind of the, the perpetual learner mentality. And it's really weird when you drill into that, when you drill deeply into that, as an individual, and then you run into the people who are just like constantly faking it, the people who are constantly pretending like they already know everything. Because I think most people probably do that when they're very young, and kind of like insecure. They sort of, they're reluctant to admit that when stuff is brand new to them, or they're, really just learning something for the first time. There's definitely this bravado thing where, young people will pretend to know things they don't really know. But sometimes you run into people later in life who are still doing that. And every time that happens to me, I'm just like, wow, that must be exhausting. And you miss out on so much. It's like so easy when somebody brings something brand new, you know nothing about it. So easy to just be like, I know nothing about that. Please tell me about that. I would love to learn about that. And actually, like, people react much better to you when you're super transparent about stuff like that. Usually it's good practice to take a spy out to dinner first before asking for their blood. No interest in stocks, Ada all the way. Pete's Coffee. Yeah, I can't I've never found any of those chain coffees that I like. I buy coffee, kind of from a roasting house, and not a snobby roasting house, just because I feel like I can get whatever I want from them, whatever kind of coffee I want. I can ensure it's freshly roasted, which is a pretty big deal. But yeah, here's my problem with the chain coffees. Most of them are related to chain retail locations like this one, right? And my problem with them, Starbucks is definitely the worst offender at this, but most of them seem to be guilty of this to some extent. They all over roast their coffee because they know their main clientele are people who don't really like coffee. Their main clientele are people who like coffee sort of like as an additive to a milkshake, right? And whether that's the full-on frappuccino style milkshake, or they're people who are just adding so much cream and sugar to their coffee that it might as well be a milkshake, that they know that's their main clientele. And if they over roast the coffee, people can add more cream and sugar and still have some coffee flavor to it. But if you just drink black coffee like I do, like I never add anything to my coffee except butter. But if you just drink straight coffee like I do, there's a certain level of roast that's appropriate for different beans. And it's not all the Starbucks super heavily over roasted thing. Like for me, I never want the super, super over roasted coffee like Starbucks serves. So that's my problem with the chain coffees. Okay. Brown Beardo says, I agree about these points on hyperinflation. I consider it the hard way for crypto adoption, but I prefer the easy way if we can pull it off. A lot less strife and chaos for our fellow countrymen. This is an interesting debate in my mind, right? Whether like it's like what's feasible and what's better, right? Like, is it feasible for us to really get the big mainstream adoption we want without the soul crushing hyperinflation that would really benefit us? Like, obviously, we don't want people to suffer, but is it even feasible for us to get the kind of adoption we really want without that kind of soul crushing inflation? I don't know. I'm of two minds on this. I would prefer it if people would just fall in love with our damn smart contracts. But there's also a part of me, and this is like the only thing I thought back in 2013, that it would be the hyperinflation that would force people to crypto. But I agree with you were saying. I'd prefer it if people would just fall in love with our damn smart contracts. But part of me also thinks, like societally crushing inflation, would force them to crypto. Damn it. I don't have a PC. I don't have a PC, so I can't play Infinity Rising, but I want to. I want to very much. I want to very much. Salmon is the best. Salmon is good. The problem with salmon is a lot of the problem with salmon is heavy metal contamination. So you guys I don't need to tell you guys this, but any kind of a larger predator fish, salmon's not even the worst out there. You could argue some of the really big predator fish, like bluefin and stuff are worse, but the little tiny fish, they're eating the little tiny plankton or whatever, and they kind of, aggregate heavy metals. And then, when you move up the chain and a slightly bigger fish eats those tiny fish, the heavy metals get more concentrated in that like slightly larger fish. Then the middle fish, the heavy metals get even more concentrated. Then the really big fish, the tuna and the sailfish and all that kind of stuff, swordfish, they have like the heaviest concentrations of the heavy metals. Salmon is a little ways up that chain for me. It is delicious though. I love it. I love it. It's just I worry about the heavy metal thing. Omar says, if crypto does well in the next crash, the 4-year cycle will definitely be over. It would signal a new era in crypto. Yeah, I mean, I saw a headline today. It was a podcast some guy did, and his thesis is definitely the 4-year cycle is definitely over. When I read it, I was like, well, it's 2026, and we did not have a parabolic high in 2025, so kind of definitionally, it's over. In Cardano, at least, it's been more than 4 years since we were above $3, and we have not had anything close to a new all-time high. So in my mind, it is over. It is over. Is it over because it's becoming a 5-year cycle? Because this time it's going to be a 5-year cycle, just because of the maturity of the US debts? Or is it broken forever and there is no cycle? Those are two different things, right? Did it just become a 5-year cycle this time because they sold, different notes maturing in 2026 instead of a greater percentage of the notes are maturing in 2026 versus 2025? So it's going to be a 5-year cycle this time, but it could go back to a 4-year cycle, just depending on the debt cycle. Could be that. Is it that the cycle is totally broken and there is no cycle? No, I think it's always going to be tied to liquidity. What we know for sure is that 2025 was still contracting liquidity. The Fed balance sheet was contracting, black and white, objective. That's not a term of art. Like, that's what happened. That's fact. And crypto doesn't do well in that environment. It looks like we're just going to have increasing liquidity over the course of 2026. Is crypto going to do better in that environment? I mean, I hope so. I hope so. Omar Wright says Dunning-Kruger effect. Nope, I've never had it. I've had a package of it in my hands, and it didn't feel right. It felt gimmicky. It felt like I was falling into a tourist trap. Just the way it was packaged and presented and everything. It felt like a tourist trap. I didn't feel comfortable with it. I never like to, when I'm in the parts of the world where you can get those kind of things, I never like to buy the same stuff that I feel like, random tourists would buy, because it's always some inauthentic, fake version of the actual thing. So I didn't buy it, but I've had it in my hands. Never had it. Espresso. I've definitely gone. I had one really intense fiat mining job once where I basically, my job was full of conflict. I'll put it that way. It was kind of part of my role was to be in very, very, very heavy conflict with other people. And so there was a period of like several years where I basically just drank espresso, and I drank a billion of them every single day. So yeah, I agree. Espresso is quite nice. Espresso is quite nice. hard to understand how people don't see the brilliance with Cardano. I mean, the general masses. It's I think it's too complicated. I think it's too complicated. So I think it's too complicated. I think people don't have the attention span to understand, right? I mean, just try to explain global state versus local state and the benefits thereof to anybody outside of Cardano even. Like try to explain that to an Ethereum person. They don't even understand it. So I think it's just too complicated. Like basically people are too dumb. People are too dumb to understand, even in crypto. So I think that's part of the problem. Omar, I hope you're right. I hope you're right. I think we're on an extended cycle now. Farmed salmon is non-metal. Okay, I mean, I guess it depends on what they eat. So there's sometimes some of the things they feed the farm salmon though seem to introduce problems too. But yeah, if you can avoid non-metal with the farm salmon, that's definitely it's good if you can avoid the heavy metals. And I hope this is true about the extended cycle. The late print means a late all-time high. 100% agreed. Liquidity, I mean, crypto does unquestionably. Crypto does well in times of liquidity. We've looked at those. We've looked at those. The levels of liquidity compared to the levels of crypto many times on this channel. So I think that's unquestionable for me at least. Would you consider having a tip wallet so we didn't have to give YouTube a cut? Maybe give us a handle of like AOS tips or donations or something. Also, I just woke up in the middle of the night, laugh out loud. Alberito, thank you for joining and thank you for saying that. I would feel weird about it. I would feel too weird about it if I just gave you guys an ADA handle and you started throwing ADA in there. I would feel too weird. I like to do the value for value exchanges, you know. So that's why I didn't even have super chats until very recently. I would just feel too weird about people just putting ADA into an account. It wouldn't feel like I was delivering value in exchange. So I couldn't do it. But I get what you're saying though. I think you make a persuasive argument. Been a while since I've made a live. Usually wake up like 2 to 3 hours after it's over for some early morning fiat mining. Thank you for joining. I appreciate it. Frezik says it could also be that the cycle is not broken, but that we've entered a regime of structurally lower highs. Yeah, I mean, so speaking of terms of art, yeah, we end up using not just in crypto, but because crypto is so tied to the TA world, and the TA world, you know, has such a long history. You know, starting off, I understand with rice trading in Asia. You know, like TA has a very long history, and so we take for granted that, you know, we use these words as sort of a shorthand, but we take for granted that they mean what people imagine they mean. So when we say things like a regime of structurally lower highs, right? Those are words that are very common in crypto. And people imagine different things when we use those words. And it's like people have quite a wide spectrum of interpretations of that. So the problem is when you boil it down, it's like, you know, if you go to any TA channel and ask them what a regime of structurally lower highs is, they're going to give you, they're going to draw, you know, they can just draw a chart for you and show you on the chart. The problem is, in terms of it being, the problem is the relationship of a label like that to the future, because they could wake up one morning and be like, we've left the regime of structurally lower highs, right? And there was no real relationship. You know, it's very difficult for them to make the case that the regime of structurally lower highs had any relationship or predictive value in terms of leaving the regime of structurally lower highs. Because you'll have people, if you watch TA channel, you'll have somebody showing you the same TA for like weeks and weeks and weeks, and they'll be like, yeah, you know, we're either gonna go up or sideways or down. And they'll be saying that for weeks, and they'll be using all these labels. You know, the Ichimoku cloud doesn't look good. the Bollinger Bands, you know, not looking good. The Fibonaccios, you know, not signifying, you know, good things. And then the next day they're like, good things, you know. And so like the labels mean something inside the niche of TA, but they don't seem to have any relationship with what might happen the next day. So I'm like, you know, what's the value of the label if it doesn't have any relationship to the future? Vietnamese coffee is the best with the evaporated milk, like lightning in a bottle. Yeah, so it is awesome. It is awesome. I used to love the one of the old. They had this guy. They used to have one. They still have. I'm sure they still have it. I'll explain why I haven't had it in years, but they used to have one that I would drink because I found the packaging to be so amusing. And it was like this old gray-haired guy who looked like kind of, I won't say gray, silver-haired, but like a very well-dressed guy in a suit, looked like, looked like a finance guy, like a Wall Street guy, right? And he had like behind him was the old Airwolf. It was specifically if I recall correctly, it was specifically the Airwolf looking helicopter. I think the helicopter's French. And then it was like his super hot secretary. And he was obviously like in a huge hurry. It was so funny because you could find this thing in many parts of the world. And it was like so obviously supposed to be like a very rich Western dude about to get in his Airwolf helicopter because he's in such a big hurry, but he's going to enjoy that coffee. Obviously, this is like a packaged version of this, but I used to love that one. It was actually really good. This is obviously before my carnivore days, before I realized how much sugar was in it via the evaporated milk. So, good morning, Dorian. Thank you for joining. Good to see you. Uh, Emil Han Stengel says, "Hi there. AOS values anonymity very highly. I would wait for midnight to enable tipping." Oh, yeah, there you go. Midnight. I haven't even thought about how midnight might affect things like that. But that's a good point. There's probably many ways in which I could leverage midnight to help preserve my anonymity. Good point. Thank you for saying that. Thanks for saying that, Dorian. Thank you. Alberito says that's fair. Let's see what. Let's see, what were you referring? Oh, yeah, okay, I know what you're referring to. Yep, thank you. I don't know if you talked already on this, but what do you think about senators talking about the crypto market legislation next Thursday? You think we will see? So that was the main, Ruandre, that was the main topic of today's video. Just go back and watch the video. I'll bore everybody to death if I retread the exact same discussion. But yeah, just go back and watch the video and you'll catch it all. How about a more consistent uptrend with decreasing downtrends, with decreasing drawdowns? Yeah, I mean, it's like whatever the label is, it's so great. They'll use the same label for like literally months. And then the next day, they're like, something happens. It's completely contrary to every label they've been using for the last month. And you're like, yo, what happened to the one regime? I thought we were in the one regime. And then all of a sudden it's like, nope, all that's over. And now we're talking about totally different labels. Now it's all about the Bollinger Bands and their relationship to the Ichimoku cloud. So that's why I don't find as much value in those. So anyways, midnight in Japan. Yeah, the Japan stuff is going to be fun. I think we'll get some good, there will be some good imagery coming out of Japan. It seems like whenever Cardano goes to Japan, it's kind of fun. In terms of, all of us not in Japan, sort of absorbing the content that comes out of it. I think that's kind of fun to watch. But we have been going for damn near 2 hours now. I know some people just jumped on. Thank you so much for jumping on. But we have been going for damn near 2 hours. And I think we've covered all of the news. We actually did not. This is a very long episode because it's a very long episode because we talked about a lot of other things. We actually didn't have that many news topics today. It was mainly just the one asked about here in this comment. That's the main thing we covered. So we actually didn't have that much news to cover today, but we did a really long episode, which is very fun always. Thank you for watching. I appreciate you watching, Andre. I appreciate you watching. Medaglia d'Oro. I don't recall that being the name, but I also can't remember the name, so I don't know. I'm sure it had this I'm sure it had a very vaguely, if you're talking about the coffee I was describing, I'm sure it had a vaguely European sounding name. Seems like that's very common with those kind of beverages. But I can't remember. I think I know. I think I know what Medaglia d'Oro is, though, and I think it's not that. They're breeding salmon with steelhead. It's really good. Oh, I didn't know this. So for anybody who doesn't know, stillhead is just basically like a giant ocean-going rainbow that turns all silver. The fact they're breeding stillhead with salmon is something I actually didn't even know about. That would be interesting. I'd be interested in that. Excited for clarity. Me too. Me too. That's why I made it the topic today. I'm excited for it too. Basically, I'll give you the TLDR just since we're here. Markup is going to be the 15th. We don't know what the timeline is after that. So you can go back and watch the episode where I cover kind of the material that's come out recently on it, but it's just going to be the markup on the 15th. We don't know when we'll actually get the Clarity Act passing the Senate, the market structure bill passing the Senate, and then the reconciliation between that and the Clarity Act that passed the House. But definitely the White House will sign whatever gets passed. But yeah, well, it looks like all we know is we're going to get a markup on the 15th. So, and then what happens past that, we don't know. In honor of Japan, there's a night haiku shielded proofs arise. Here's a night haiku shielded proofs arise. Arise, midnight keeps the secret safe. Oh, proofs are, here's night haiku. Shielded proofs. Okay, the haiku is this. Shielded proofs arise, midnight keeps the secret safe, data stays your own. Did you just write that or was that AI produced? I like it either way. Yep. I think, isn't that the powdered espresso thing? Medaglia d'Oro, yeah, medallion of gold. Isn't that just the powdered, isn't that the powdered espresso one? Let's go, Matt. It's a zonket. It's a zonket. What, oh, is that the stillhead salmon thing? Stillhead is one of the best fish, hands down. Yep. The salmonids are all good, I think. I think all the salmonids are pretty good. Stumptown coffee, a lot of stillhead in P-Town. Okay. That'd be great. I would love it. I mean, Zonky. Oh, okay, Zonky. I feel that we might get some Senate passings this month. That'd be fantastic. If it would pass this month, I'll be so happy if it passes this month. That'll be fantastic. Yeah, so I think we've covered everything. Apologies for people who jumped on right at the end. You can go back and check. If you missed the discussion of the Clarity Act, you can go back and watch the rest of the video. And then we spend a lot of time off topic talking about many different things, including various new types of fish and the eating of fish, but the eating of other carnivore items. But thank you so much for everybody for joining tonight. We'll be back at it tomorrow, but I hope everybody is having a great week and I will talk to you soon.